who am I in the world? Who are you in the world? And perhaps most importantly, how do you and I connect as we in this world? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Village Voices podcast, where we explore various topics that connect people with nature to create positive youth development outcomes, more equitable communities, and build conservation stewardship. My name is Jay Hyland from Project Emo, and I'll be your host today as we explore the intersection of adventurous learning and youth social growth. Those questions we posed a moment ago may be some of the most critical questions any human asks themselves, but they're really, really important to adolescence. Think back to those awkward years as you started to gain independence, explore your internal sense of self, forge deeply connected relationships, built a tribe, and negotiated the delicate balancing act growing from childhood into emergent adulthood. Those years in between, adolescence, they might have been as fraught with turmoil as they were filled with possibility. Each day a slow construction of our new adult selves. In this episode, we're going to explore possibilities to help youth grow and develop in a positive, social way through adventurous experience. Adventure education, that's a loaded term. For some, it conjures images of expeditions into the mountains, muddy boots slogging wearily up past the crumbles on the way to a remote summit. For others, it may be the adrenaline, fear, and joy sailing through the air on a zip line through the trees of a ropes course. Maybe some envision the edge of a paddle, breaking the waterline, glistening in the sun as they canoe along a slow-moving river in the wilderness. Defining adventure is even more challenging than living it. For some, adventure may be a walk in the woods, or even a simple day in the park. Whatever the adventure may be, there is something about sharing that experience, stepping outside of our comfort zones, supporting each other, and overcoming adversity that makes shared adventure really powerful.
I'm probably 50 yards away from him. And as I'm making my tea, I look, and there's a deer coming across the meadow, heading right to the outhouse.
Oh, I see where this is going.
That was Shawn Moriarty. Shawn has been running youth camps across the U.S. for decades. As an adventure educator, he's walked quite a few miles alongside of youth. He's also part of our Project Emo Village and the author of Ropes of Ecology, connecting people to nature, community, and place. I asked Shawn how he had seen adventurous learning provide adolescents a chance for positive group growth. He told me about a time many moons ago when he was working at a camp in Connecticut with a group of sophomores from a residential high school in the region. They were participating in a weekend team-building event.
We were kind of near the end of the first day, and the second day was going to be a fairly short day. We were going to do some other stuff. And we were doing the wall, the classic wooden wall, get everybody over, blah, blah, blah. And we had done a whole bunch of prep stuff, all day long. This was kind of be their peak thing. And they're getting ready to do it. And I knew the next day we had some things that their teacher and I had worked on to kind of cap out the weekend. And they were just storming hard. And these girls, I guess they were freshmen. They were really storming hard. They'd known each other for a whole semester. And, so this was kind of a early spring retreat. And so they're doing the wall and just storming like crazy. And it was a really first big storm that they had. And really getting into it, and some personal stuff was starting to edge into the comments around previous stuff that I found out later talking to the teacher that had been going on at school.
Yep.
Right? Nothing horrible, no really, really derogatory things, but just those slight little barbs that were ratcheting.
A little relational aggression.
And I'm looking at the teacher, and I just kind of look at him with that look like, I'm going to try something. And so I stop the group, and we come down, they come back over away from the wall. We step away for a little bit, and I do a quick check-in, the whole thumbs up, thumbs down, thumb in the middle, no words. I just want to get a quick sense. And we had a lot of middles and a lot of downs, maybe one or two finger thumbs up, but and everybody was just tense. Like you could see the body posturing, and faces were kind of scowled, and even the teacher was kind of like, oh, okay.
Right. We're doing this.
Being a residential school, they were used to having conflicts like this because the kids all lived together. But And so I kind of put it out there to him, and I just said, hey, here's the deal. You're all together for the next 3.5 years. as a grade because they stay together, right?
Right.
And I said, if this is what the next 3.5 years is going to look like, I think, and your teacher might agree that you're going to have some issues, and you've got to go back to school on Monday, and you have an opportunity here. You're going to be together for the rest of your high school careers. And I said, if we can work on how to communicate with each other, and it's okay to argue, into the whole conflict is not bad, and we start talking, and I said, let's just start over, right? We're still going to do the wall, but let's just start over. But let's start with talking about how you see other people in the group as being key to the success of this group, not yourself. You don't get to talk about yourself. We can do that later tonight because we had a closing thing going after campfire. So I knew we had him again. And I just kind of threw it out there. I'm like, you can get a choice. You can either keep being like this, or you can really try to create something better.
Shawn told me about how he used a symbolic object to help the group process this new challenge. In this process, the facilitator uses some item as a token. It doesn't have to be fancy. It could be a pine cone, a piece of string, a ball, or even a climbing carabiner. This token helps guide reflection and can act as a focus for sharing thoughts and emotions in a way that sometimes is easier than just opening the group up to discussion. This token is often passed from person to person in the group as they dive more deeply into some often heavy topics.
And I just let them go, and it was quiet for a little bit. And then just watching them, we did that for about a half hour or so, and then we did the wall, and they did great. But the cool part is that I was there full-time for another year and a half, and then part-time for a couple of years after that. So I actually got to work with this group up through their senior year. And it was just neat to see when they came back the following fall. And that was one of the first things we talked about.
Yeah, right.
And I kind of did it to say, so how's everybody doing? How are we doing? And it was just amazing to see these young women just really have taken ownership of how they interacted with each other, how they talk with each other, how they interacted with other grades, right? And even talking with the teacher, they had definitely continued to storm a little bit the rest of that semester. Sure. And there was other stuff going on. But he said that they were still always willing to have a conversation.
We're going to hear a bit more from Shawn in just a moment, but we'd like to take a few to extend our gratitude to a group of folks in our village without whom, well, we wouldn't be doing this here today. Project Emo wouldn't be where it is today without the generous support of Pro Bono Partnership. Their team of experts helped us incorporate and gain charitable 501c3 status. At every step of the way, the volunteers at Pro Bono Partnership offered guidance and diligent counsel to help us grow in ways we never could have achieved on our own. Pro Bono Partnership is celebrating 25 years of providing free legal help to nonprofits in Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. Founded on the belief that strengthening nonprofits will make stronger communities, the partnership's mission is to provide nonprofits with the legal advice and educational resources they need to build capacity, reduce risk, and enhance programming with confidence. The partnership services were never more critical than during the last 2 years, when the global pandemic led to shifting requirements for nonprofits and a greater need for services within communities. The partnership and its 1,400 volunteer attorneys were there to help, providing 38,000 hours of free legal assistance to nearly 900 nonprofits, valued at $19 million in 2020. Pro Bono Partnership is also a nonprofit organization, and your support is what makes their mission possible. Learn more at probonopartner.org. Sometimes youth adventure programs give rise to amazing stories. Sometimes they're epic tales of overcoming adversity. Sometimes they're heartwarming yarns that speak to a group coming together and building lifelong relationships. Sometimes they involve deer and outhouses. I asked Shawn to recall a tale of such total silliness from an expedition trip.
I was in Washington State with a group of kids, and we were staying in a somewhat backcountry, a couple miles in, but very frequented campground. but pretty sparse, pretty spread out. There wasn't a lot of amenities. There was a couple outhouses and that kind of stuff. And I'd always get up early in the morning and to make tea and have my quiet time before all the campers woke up. All 8 of them, and sitting there. And this kid gets up and he goes, "Hey, can I go to the bathroom?" I'm like, "Sure, dude, go." Right. So, and on trips we had a rating system for going to the bathroom in the backcountry.
Of course they did. Shawn told me the rather in-depth system that the youth built, where they would collect up to 20 points for various aspects of answering nature's call in the backcountry. That's pretty much nirvana for youth teen boys. One of the more tasteful categories was view. If you could get a majestic view, you got big points. I suppose I can get on board with that. So, off we go.
And so, he goes about halfway down to the outhouse, turns around, comes back up and goes, "Hey, can I leave the door open?" I'm like, "Sure, dude, it's a beautiful view." So he goes down, and I'm sitting there making my tea, and I can see him. The outhouse is, the back of it's facing me. And he goes down, and he's so excited, right? Because he's the first one up. He's going to get this. He's going to get extra view points, right? Because he's got the door open. And he goes down there, and he goes inside. I can see the door open, right? And I'm probably 50 yards away from him. And as I'm making my tea, I look, and there's a deer coming across the meadow, heading right to the outhouse.
Oh, I see where this is going.
And I'm watching, and in my head, I'm like, I could probably say something. I want to see where this goes. And it was it wasn't like a buck or anything, it was a fairly small deer. And it goes and it sticks its head into the outhouse. All I hear is this scream. The deer takes off. He comes tearing back up to me, kind of pulling his pants up as he goes. And he gets up and he's like, "Hey, dear." Meanwhile, he's trying to explain this to me. Out of breath, I'm rolling on the ground laughing. And so he finally comes down. Like 1 or 2 of the other kids wake up. You see a couple of their heads pop out of various tents, because this kid's screaming. And so he catches his breath and he just looks at me and he goes, "So do I get extra points for the deer?" And he comes back out. And it was just those moments where, they were unfiltered. And I think that's such a unique thing, especially on expeditions when you're away and, you don't have the same societal restrictions or expectations. And it was just nice to see these 13-year-old boys. And a number of them went on to be counselors at that camp. And so, yeah, it was just really neat. Yeah. Those funny little moments where humor happens.
Once we were done regaling each other with stories of the silliness of wildlife and nature's call on trips, Shawn and I explored the possibilities of adventurous learning to help youth regulate emotion. I asked him for some of his insights about them regulating emotions through what can be quite intentionally challenging experiences. One of the most powerful aspects of adventurous learning is that these experiences can invite us out of our comfort zones and into a space where we can grow and adapt to new circumstances as we overcome adversity. Sometimes this is referred to as the stretch zone. The very nature of this process and dynamics of group interactions can sometimes lead to some pretty intense emotions, and that's exactly the point. I asked Shawn to share with me some of the ways he'd seen youth regulate and properly express what can sometimes be less than productive emotions during his programs.
I think one thing I've always tried to build into programs is giving kids a way out. And it's just, hey, if you need a break, step off to the side. Yeah. No biggie. If you need a break, just let me know. Or, I tried to in a lot of team building programs when I got older, was to have someone whose job was the recorder, right? And their job was, I give them a notepad and a piece of paper, and their job was just to take notes. Nice. Right. And to be objective as possible. Yeah. But allowing emotions to be present in team building, because they're real, so often in school or in work, we're kind of taught the unwritten rule is you don't bring your emotions unless it's enthusiasm or, nose to the grindstone or whatever. You don't bring those emotions to work. If you're having a crappy day, have it on your own time.
Right.
But with experiential education, that's very much part of it. And I think that, the whole, you have your, the safety zone, the growth zone, and the panic zone, and being comfortable, comfort zone. And I think sometimes if you can guide the kids rather than kind of popcorning back and forth from comfort zone to growth zone to fear zone, panic zone, rather than popcorning back and forth, if we can guide them kind of in a spiral, where you keep going, into comfort, out into the growth zone, and maybe that circle, that spiral goes a little farther out into the panic zone. But I find if you can slowly and gradually, if you have the time, to slowly expand the ellipse of that circle, right, going out of your comfort zone into the learning zone, it allows them to regulate, right? It's not all of a sudden we have no food.
yes, we're easing into it.
Or I've taken away I've blindfolded everybody and made half of them mute.
Right.
And so by giving them, unless I very specifically say, hey, this activity is going to have some surprises in it,
right.
Letting them know what the consequences are ahead of time, because I think that very few people truly like surprises, especially if it's going to make them look bad.
Yeah.
But if we can help them and give them some of those tools, that's why I like the things like, the hold up your fingers for, how's everybody feeling, or the thumbs up, thumbs down, any number of those check-in tools. It allows kids an opportunity and the facilitator to kind of gauge where everybody's going. Yeah. And I think, imagine if that was done in class at school, if teachers could take the time at the beginning of a class, hey, let's check in. How's everybody doing today?
Right.
I get to do that at summer camp sometimes with my staff, is to have that morning check-in or an afternoon check-in, and just kind of get a sense. Hey, how are things going? That was a rough day.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. And it's hard because a lot of folks are not ready for that. Especially the college age stuff, and it's not their fault because we're not taught that unless you really dig into it, unless you come from a family that really handles emotions well. Or you're lucky enough to be in a school program or have a mentor or have, a health class that might deal with personal, health regulation and emotional regulation. We don't get that, right. and we don't see that in movies or TV shows or books or whatever.
Yeah.
We see a lot of snide comments and put downs that gets the laugh track.
Right.
And you don't see the real personal, how to deal with stuff.
What other things do you have to share about social emotional learning in your adventure?
I think just a couple of things. One is the acknowledgement of process, right? And because it's such an integral part, whether it's learning how to tie a knot, because you're going to then, rappel off of it later, or build a shelter, or whether it's starting with a couple mile hike and then going up to a week-long trip, or whether it's starting off a team building program with a group juggle and going to something much, much more difficult along during the day, or a week or a month, however long, a semester if it's a school program. But recognizing that life happens in a process, and that there's yes, there might be some times when there is a black and white, yes or no, or right or wrong in something, but oftentimes there's those nuances. And I think that whatever the context is that there's always opportunity to get better. And that could be better in a skill. It could be better in your emotional regulation. It could be better in how you and I communicate, and how you and I plan a trip, on what risks a group is able to take. But it's that continual process, and there's that saying, practice makes perfect, which is a lovely sentiment.
Right.
One I like better is a folk musician out on the Cape Cod named David Roth, not David Lee Roth, but different David Roth. But he has a song, and it's called "Practice Makes Progress." And I always like that idea, and I think it fits in with experiential education, and that you're going to have good days and bad days, and acknowledging that, and acknowledging kind of the realness of life.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I ever did a trapeze jump, when I was getting trained to do ropes courses. I sat on that platform for what seemed like hours, right? And I knew it was safe. I knew psychologically it was safe. I knew physics-wise it was safe. But just acknowledging the emotions that were there, and the fear and the excitement and all those kind of things, because we don't get to do that very often in our daily lives. I mean, you always have to be cool, calm, and collected if you're a leader, if you're a boss, or you don't want to let your boss see or your teacher see that you're having a bad day, and all of those things. And I think that experiential education and adventure education really allows us to work with the gooey, sticky, emotional stuff stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And even if you as the facilitator are having a crappy day, you know, you may have gotten up on the wrong side of the bed. Your kid
Sure.
was a pain getting them to school.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you and your significant other had a fight that morning, whatever it was, you know, you
Yeah.
spilled your morning beverage on the car.
Yeah.
And now you've got to show up and be professional for this group,
Yeah.
you know? And even like if you and I were facilitating a program, I could show up with all that baggage and I could say, hey, Jason, I'm at like 50% right now. I need 10 minutes to get my stuff together.
Right.
Can you start the group and I'll come and join? You know, and if we've worked out a relationship and we kind of understand each other, then it's a no-brainer,
Sure.
right? And it's not a tit for tat, you know. It's that, you know, you're there for the other people.
Yeah.
And I think that those interconnection skills are so much more important than those independent skills.
Yeah.
And realizing that we're going to go farther if all of us pitch in on this.
Yes. Yeah.
and make it work. So, yeah, I think it's always it's always an adventure,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, intentional use of the word, even from the facilitator standpoint. You know, I might have this great program, you know, designed, and something could go wrong. The group might not be there yet.
Yeah.
And you have to adapt, and you have to be able to be flexible, and being honest, you know, and dealing with frustrations and all of those things, and expectations. And so it adds that level of excitement, at least for me, that level of
Yeah.
adventure. So
Well, I think so much of it is we have to give kids a space to practice those emotions.
yes.
Because if we just say, you know, sit in class all day, go to work all day, never have conflict, never storm in your relationships, then when things do go wrong, as they invariably will, we just as people don't have the capacity for it because it's not a skill we've practiced. And
Right.
emotional regulation, to your point, and this ability to interact and engage with each other, having built a relationship, those are practice skills. And I think
Yeah.
it's just so critical for kids to have those. And I just think you just listening to some of your examples, you know, adventure education is kind of really almost a perfect palette for that.
Mm. Yeah. I wish we could do it more,
Yes.
you know, in all venues. I think that, you know, and I think, you know, team building sometimes gets a bad rap.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard. You have 2 hours with a group.
Right.
What are you really going to accomplish in 2 hours? And you know, if it's done over time, multiple times, multiple sessions, and built into the culture of a company or an organization or a school, that's when you really, you know, start to develop some things, and you know, you can give them a good taste in a couple hours. But you know, even, you know, like you and I were teaching the fire building the other day, and you know, it's great if you can light a fire once.
Right.
You know, but you know, imagine if we were trying to build fires in that rainstorm that came in that night.
Yeah.
You know,
Different ballgame.
totally different experience, right? And I think that's the beauty of it. I can do spider web 100 times, and every time it's going to be different.
Yeah. So Shawn, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Any final thoughts? Any final words of wisdom you can share with us in the village tonight?
I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got along the lines of facilitation is, in working with groups, is don't be too attached to the way you think things should look. Because the group oftentimes has a much better awareness of what they need.
Yeah.
We just need to be able to hear what they're saying or not saying, and adapt accordingly. And sometimes throw out the whole plan and start over.
Right.
And try not to take it personally.
Back to the drawing board. I did a number of times. I've had to go back to the drawing board mid program.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. Jay, thanks. This has been fun.
Yes, thank you very much. So thank you very much, and we will definitely be chatting back soon.
Sounds good.
All right, have a good one, my friend. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's it for this episode, Villagers. From everyone here at Project Emo, we'd like to thank you for taking this very first step on an exciting journey alongside of us. We hope you enjoyed this exploration of adventure education and social emotional learning as much as we did. If you did enjoy it, consider subscribing to the podcast. If you really, really enjoyed it, hop on over to www.projectemo.org and consider supporting our charitable efforts, as every episode of Village Voices podcasts, much like our youth programs, is supported by listeners just like you.